The date was September 3rd, 1260. Dawn crept slowly across the rugged hills of northern Palestine,
spilling pale gold over the silent valley of Ain Jalut. The calm morning air trembled under a distant, growing thunder. Hooves. Almost 20,000 Mongol cavalry were advancing in a single sweeping tide, the ground vibrating beneath the weight of their movement. For 4 decades, the Mongol Empire had carved a path of destruction from the Pacific to the Mediterranean. No kingdom had stopped them. No army had survived them. They had crushed the Jin dynasty, subdued the Song, annihilated the Khwarezmians, and erased Baghdad itself. The fall of the Islamic world's most illustrious city had sent shockwaves from Egypt to Europe, from Damascus to Delhi, and now the Mongols were riding toward their next target, Cairo. Every Mongol warrior was a master of warfare since childhood. They fired 20 arrows per minute at full gallop, their composite bows bending with terrifying power. Their formations shifted like living machines, precise, efficient, ruthless. Commanders communicated across miles using colored flags, horn blasts, and galloping messengers. Their decimal structure, units of 10, 100, 1,000, and 10,000, made their armies move like gears in a gigantic war engine. But the true secret of Mongol success wasn't just their skill, it was fear. Entire cities surrendered without a single arrow fired because Mongol reputation had spread like a disease. Everyone remembered the massacres of Nishapur, the burning of Herat, the rivers of blood in Baghdad. Resist and die, submit and live was the Mongol message, and most cities obeyed. But this morning, hidden among the hills above Ain Jalut, stood a different kind of army, one that was not built on fear, but on discipline. These were the Mamluks of Egypt, the slave soldiers who had risen to become the most formidable cavalry force in the Islamic world. Taken as children from the Kitbuqa steppe and the Caucasus, they spent their youth in relentless training. From age 7, they lived, breathed, and dreamed only warfare. Their lives were forged around mounted combat, archery, swordsmanship, and tactical discipline. Whereas the Mongols were brilliant generalists, the Mamluks were lethal specialists. They trained until sword work became reflex, until their horses obeyed their thoughts, until firing a bow at full speed felt like second nature. The Mongols thrived in open plains where they could maneuver freely. The Mamluks were designed for close combat, ambushes, and terrain that broke cavalry formations. Their armor was heavier, their horses stronger in tight spaces, their blades optimized for slicing through light cavalry like the Mongols. And above all, the Mamluks had a commander who understood the Mongol mind, Baybars al-Bundugdari. Baybars had studied the Mongol invasion of Syria firsthand. He had seen how they used feigned retreats, how their cavalry wheeled around like swarms of locusts, how their arrows darkened the sky. But he also saw something else: patterns, predictable habits, tactical confidence that bordered on arrogance. He knew the Mongols always pursued retreating forces aggressively. He knew they needed space to maneuver, and he knew that in narrow valleys where formations stretched thin, their coordination collapsed. The Mamluk Sultan Qutuz also understood the stakes. Egypt was the last major power standing between the Mongols and total domination of the Middle East. If Cairo fell, every remaining Arab and Muslim territory would eventually fall with it. There was no retreat, no negotiation, only one chance to stop the Mongol war machine. So Qutuz marched his army north, toward the one place where Mongol strength could be turned into weakness, Ain Jalut, a valley surrounded by high ridges, narrow passages, and broken terrain that choked movement, the perfect trap. When the Mongol commander Kitbuqa arrived near the valley, he saw what he expected: a small Mamluk force positioned near the spring, perhaps 3,000 cavalry. Baybars exchanged volleys of arrows, then suddenly raised his banner and ordered a retreat. The movement looked genuine, disciplined yet shaky, exactly what a pressured force would look like. Kitbuqa smiled. He believed he had seen this pattern before across China, Persia, and Syria. Another broken enemy, another easy victory. He ordered the pursuit.
The Mongol vanguard surged into the valley of Ain Jalut with growing confidence, their arrows whistling past the retreating Mamluks. Dust clouds rose behind them as they accelerated downhill, convinced they were witnessing yet another enemy collapse. Every Mongol victory had begun this way, an opponent breaking under pressure, a formation unraveling, fear turning into flight. Kitbuqa had seen it 100 times. At Mohi, fleeing Hungarians had been cut down by the thousands. At Legnica, Polish knights were ridden down and butchered on open ground. Today, he believed, would be no different. Baybar's rearguard fought just hard enough to keep the pursuit alive, firing occasional arrows, clashing briefly with the Mongol vanguard, and then falling back again, as though unable to endure the pressure. But the tempo of the retreat was carefully planned. Too fast, and suspicion would rise. Too slow, and the Mongols would reorganize. Baybar's genius was to ride the razor's edge between panic and control. He let small pockets of his soldiers break off, creating the illusion of fragmentation, but always ensuring they rejoined the main body just out of Mongol sight. Every mile of that retreat was acting, one long performance designed to lure Kitbuqa into the jaws of an invisible trap. As the chase continued deeper into the valley, the Mongol formation began to elongate. Fast, light cavalry pulled ahead, heavy cavalry lagged behind, and reserve forces struggled to maintain cohesion. This spreading of the line was exactly what Baybar's had engineered. The tight, deadly Mongol coordination, so effective in open plains, was dissolving inside the narrow terrain. Horn signals echoed uselessly off the hills, and riders on the flanks struggled to see the central banners. Still, Kitbuqa pressed forward, believing total victory was minutes away. By the time the Mongols had chased the Mamluks nearly 3 miles into Ain Jalut, the valley walls closed around them like tightening fists. At that precise moment, Baybar's gave the signal. From the ridges above, nearly 5,000 hidden Mamluk heavy cavalry under Sultan Kotuz erupted from behind the rocks in thorny scrub. Their sudden appearance was like a thunderclap. One moment the valley was empty, the next it was overflowing with armored riders charging at full speed. On the western ridge, another 4,000 Mamluk cavalry under Baybar's second-in-command launched their assault simultaneously. The Mongols were suddenly trapped in a three-sided storm of steel. The psychological shock alone was enough to stagger units trained to be unshakable. They had chased what they thought was a broken enemy, only to find themselves encircled by fresh, disciplined elite cavalry. Mongol communication collapsed almost instantly. Dust clouds swallowed banners. Horn calls were drowned by the roar of hooves and clashing metal. Units that relied on structured coordination found themselves isolated and overwhelmed. Riders glanced desperately for orders that never came. The valley floor, moments ago a pathway to victory, became a killing ground where chaos eclipsed every Mongol advantage. In contrast, Mamluk discipline shone with brutal clarity. Their horses, bigger, stronger, and trained specifically for close-quarters combat, slammed into Mongol lines like a living avalanche. Mamluk swords, curved and designed for powerful, sweeping cuts, carved through lighter Mongol armor. Their arrows, fired at close range with heavy drawweights, pierced Mongol lamellar plates where they were weakest. Every Mamluk rider had been raised from childhood for this exact kind of fight. Cavalry to cavalry melee, where discipline, precision, and training mattered more than mobility and range. Kitbuqa tried desperately to restore order. He galloped across the battlefield, screaming commands, rallying pockets of troops wherever he could. For a moment, small Mongol groups attempted countercharges, but the broken terrain was against them. Their horses lacked room to maneuver. Their archery advantage was useless at close range. Their formations, normally fluid and adaptable, were boxed in, crushed and shattered. The great machine that had conquered half the world was being dismantled, piece by men who understood its weaknesses better than any enemy before them. As the Mamluk hammer closed in, Kitbuqa refused to retreat. Loyalty to Hulagu Khan and Mongol honor demanded he fight until the final moment. Surrounded on all sides, the veteran commander launched a last desperate charge toward Kutuz's center, hoping to kill the Mamluk Sultan and reverse the tide. But the Mamluks were ready. Their heavy cavalry collided with Kitbuqa's unit in a whirlwind of blades and blood. A Mamluk lance struck the Mongol general through the chest, throwing him from his horse. His death sent a shockwave of panic through his remaining troops. Without their commander, without formation, without space, the Mongols broke. A rout began, a Mongol rout, something unheard of in living memory. Those who tried to flee were ridden down by Mamluk pursuit forces positioned precisely for that purpose. Others abandoned their horses and scrambled up the valley walls, only to be cut down by Mamluk archers perched on the ridges. By midday, the Mongol vanguard was gone, destroyed so completely that the survivors who crawled out of the valley carried with them not just defeat, but the collapse of a legend. For the first time since the days of Genghis Khan, a Mongol army had been crushed in open battle, not by weather or terrain alone, not by disease or political division, but by superior tactics, flawless discipline, and a commander who outthought them at every turn.
Ain Jalut wasn't just a battle. It was the moment the Mongol myth cracked, the moment the world realized the invincible could bleed. The dust of Ain Jalut had barely begun to settle when the strategic consequences of the battle rippled outward across the region. The surviving Mongol riders fled north in scattered, terrified groups, something unimaginable just a day earlier. Their stories spread faster than they could ride. The Mamluks had shattered the unstoppable army. Their feared general Kitbuqa was dead, and the myth of Mongol invincibility had been torn apart by a trap executed with surgical precision. When those exhausted survivors reached Damascus, the Mongol garrison stationed there immediately sensed the shift in the wind. Panic sparked rebellion within hours. Local Syrian commanders who had submitted to Mongol rule now saw an opportunity to reclaim their authority. Cities across the region, Aleppo, Homs, Damascus, began to rise in open revolt, expelling Mongol administrators and wiping out isolated detachments. The Ilkhanate, which had seemed ready to dominate the entire Middle East, suddenly found itself struggling to hold even the territory it already controlled. The empire built on fear was now itself afraid. In Cairo, the news of victory sent waves of celebration through the city. Sultan Qutuz emerged as the savior of the Islamic world, but he himself understood the fragile balance they now stood upon. Ain Jalut had destroyed a Mongol vanguard, not the full force of the Ilkhanate. Hulagu Khan still commanded tens of thousands of warriors in Persia and beyond. If he marched west in retaliation, Egypt would face a full-scale Mongol invasion. Qutuz moved quickly to secure the region. Mamluk forces swept north into Palestine and Syria, reclaiming cities that had surrendered under Mongol terror. Baybars led several of these operations with ruthless efficiency, clearing out remaining Mongol garrisons and re-establishing Mamluk control. Medieval chroniclers describe these days as filled with a mix of vengeance and relief, villages cheering for the returning Mamluks, while Mongol agents and supporters fled for their lives. The victory at Ain Jalut had not just protected Egypt, it had resurrected the political and military confidence of the Islamic world. Yet the Mongol Empire itself felt the deeper shock. For decades, it had expanded across continent with no serious military opposition. The death of a single general on an empty battlefield in Palestine might seem small compared to the empire's vast size, but psychologically, it was seismic. Hulagu Khan, upon hearing the report, was said to have been consumed with rage. But he was trapped by timing. The death of the great Khan Monke had fractured the imperial lineage, forcing Hulagu to return east to participate in succession struggles. His armies were stretched thin, his supply lines fragile, and his rivals in Mongolia were watching for any sign of weakness. A Western campaign for revenge was impossible. Ain Jalut forced the Mongols into a strategic pause at the very moment when their empire depended on perpetual conquest to maintain cohesion. In that pause, the cracks inside the empire began to widen. One of the key reasons the Mongol war machine had been so successful was its ability to move as a unified force across vast distances. But now, each Khanate began drifting apart. The Golden Horde in the north feuded with the Ilkhanate in the southwest. The Chagatai Khanate fought over borders with the Yuan dynasty in the east. Without the aura of invincibility, diplomacy among the Mongols became fragile, alliances became temporary, and the unified military doctrine that once terrorized the world slowly lost its coherence. In effect, Ain Jalut signaled the beginning of Mongol decline long before the empire truly fell apart. The Mamluks had shown that Mongol supremacy was based not on divine fate, but on tactics,
and tactics could be countered. Soon other enemies would learn the same lesson. Meanwhile, the Mamluk Sultanate transformed almost overnight into the new power of the Middle East. Baybars, the mastermind behind the Ain Jalut trap, seized the throne shortly afterward, becoming one of the most formidable rulers in the region. Under his leadership, the Mamluks built a professional army, fortified their borders, reorganized their political institutions, and turned Egypt and Syria into a shield against all future Mongol attempts at expansion. What began as a desperate defense against annihilation evolved into a long-term strategy of resistance. For nearly a century, the Mamluks and Mongols fought along the Euphrates and northern Syria, but never again did the Mongols manage to break through into Egypt. The psychological balance had shifted. Mongol commanders now approached battles with caution rather than certainty, while Mamluk commanders attacked with the confidence that they had already defeated the greatest army in the world. Historians often debate whether Ain Jalut was the decisive turning point in the Mongol Empire's decline. Some argued that internal succession conflicts mattered more. Others believed that the limits of logistics in the Middle East made further expansion unsustainable. But one thing is undeniable. Ain Jalut shattered the illusion of Mongol omnipotence. The fear that had paralyzed cities into surrender evaporated. The Mongols were no longer supernatural forces of destruction. They were warriors who could bleed and die like anyone else. That alone reshaped the political landscape of 3 continents. Even in Europe, kings who had spent years preparing for inevitable Mongol invasion found themselves reassessing their strategies. Chroniclers in France and England described the victory as a miracle delivered to the world, a sign that the Mongol storm had finally been broken. Back in the valley itself, the battlefield became a symbol of resistance. Travelers who passed Ain Jalut in the years afterward wrote of a quiet plain surrounded by hills, a place where the fate of nations had turned in a single morning. The Mamluks preserved stories of the battle as part of their military identity, teaching future generations how discipline, intelligence, and precise execution could overcome even the most terrifying enemy. And for the Mongols, it remained a rare memory of catastrophic defeat, one they never managed to reverse. When the sun set on September 3, 1260, the Mongol Empire was still vast, powerful, and feared, but it was no longer unstoppable. In that valley, the world learned that even the mightiest army can fall to a perfectly executed plan. And it all began with a retreat that wasn't a retreat, a trap that unfolded step by step, and a commander who understood that the key to defeating an invincible enemy was to make him believe he had already won.